Welcome back to Book Break. I'm Olivia from ThatFictionLife and I'm here with Vic James. The books behind us right here are her magical creation. So she wrote Gilded Cage and Tarnished City. The second book has just recently come out. So thank you, Vic, for coming in today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Liv, thank you. I live for your tweets about my book.
They get a bit obsessive and crazy. Today we're going to be doing a guide to Gilded Cage so that people know what to expect, which is just soul-destroying feels. Do you want to just say what the series is about?
When I was writing Gilded Cage, I had this sort of comedy pitch, which was Game of Thrones meets Downton Abbey in a world where Voldemort won. People were like, wow, I really get it. Although someone did once tweet me and said, that pitch makes no sense whatsoever, and I was like...
Have they read the book?
Gilded Cage is set in an alternate Britain now. It looks almost exactly like our world, very much with a sort of a focus on a kind of 1%, 99% dynamic. We have our rulers, and then there's all the rest of us. The thing that divides them from us is that they have magical gifts. So they live very much like the sort of classic British aristocracy in sumptuous estates, like grand houses, wicked aristocrats. And if you're unfortunately not one of the 1% who has magic and lives in a grand house, then you have to spend 10 years of your life doing something called the slave days, which is a kind of sort of indentured service. So you are not free, you become a chattel of the state. The book focuses on two families. It focuses on the Hadleys, 3 kids. There's Abby, who's the eldest, Luke, her little brother, a couple of years younger, and then their little sister Daisy. Hadley family, mum and dad, have sort of had a little family council with Abby, and they've decided that the best thing that they can all do is stay together as a family and start their slave days. Abby has what she thinks is a great plan for how they could do their slave days, and the rest of the book is basically how that plan goes wrong.
Do you want to just say how Tarnished City differs?
Yeah, so Tarnished City is the sequel, and it's a 3-book series, and it's essentially one story. It's one very tight story. So Tarnished City picks up exactly where Gilded Cage finishes. Book 1 is set in 2 locations. It's set in the slave town of Millmore, and the other location is Kynaston, which is the grand home of the Jardine family, who are the most powerful. You like the Jardines, don't you? You shouldn't, but you do. Like if Slytherin was a family, that would be the Jardines. So we spend book 1 in those 2 places. And then the events at the end of book 1 mean that everything changes. So book 2 is in 2 separate locations. One of them is Island Dorcas, which is the Scottish castle that belongs to a rather depraved aristocrat called Lord Crovan. And then the other location is London. So London is the tarnished city of the title.
And you see why it's tarnished by the end. But too many things happen that break my soul.
Tarnished and kind of swimming in blood, right?
Yes. Did you plot out the whole 3-book series first?
I knew before I started writing book 1 where things were going to end at book 3. Before I wrote a word of Gilded Cage, there's a certain image that I had in my head. Somebody lying on the ground dead, somebody else responsible for putting them there.
Sorry, what?
And that image was with me from the very beginning. And there were other things that I knew. As for this whole question of like why it falls into 3 books, people always say that fantasy, you've got world building, so you need time to do that. I think the other thing about me is I love like classical theatre, and I particularly love revenge drama. They're smart, political, very passionate, very violent, kind of twisted stories, which normally end with a whole bunch of people dead. They're also in 3 acts, so whether that kind of sort of subconsciously influenced the way I thought about it. And then there's also the fact that the story moves. So the first story, like I said, is the slave town and the great estate. Book 2 is kind of the prison castle and London. I'm not going to give away where book 3 is, but it goes somewhere I really love.
With a dead body at the end. Lovely.
Yeah, don't use the singular there.
Bodies. I'm going to be one of them. What drew you to writing an alternate Britain versus creating a whole new fantasy world?
You know, I always sort of had this desire to do something that feels relatable, kind of relevant, that's got something to say about how we live today. Because my day job is in TV, you know, I worked in news for all those years. I'd made a series of TV programmes that sort of looked at inequality in Britain today, you know, sort of British politics. All of that was kind of like right there at my fingertips. I knew I didn't want to write something that was just a kind of sort of bleak kind of slice of life. Yeah, I wanted, you know, like sort of whiz-bang kind of magic explosions. Then we have dragons in book 3. There's a little teaser for you.
No.
Yes.
I love dragons. I went to this indie bookstore and they had a whole section on guides on how to own dragons, how to care for them.
Everybody should own a dragon. Why do we not?
Can the scientists, you know, come up with some sort of hybrid animal with dragons?
Like a teacup dragon would be really cute, wouldn't it? You know, obviously a big one would be difficult to fit in the car.
If you could have another character from another book come into your series, who would you pick?
Oh my God.
Do you have any favourite books that you'd want to steal a character from?
I do love science fiction. I'm quite fond of Hal, the supercomputer in 2001 AD. Hal is a kind of sort of megalomaniac, omniscient, and kind of finally homicidal supercomputer. I also quite like Wintermute, who's the AI from William Gibson's Neuromancer. So they would be quite kick-ass. I would love to have, you know, sort of technology clashing with magic.
Did you do a lot of research before writing the series?
When I was little, my parents joined the National Trust. So I spent like my whole childhood being dragged to, I say dragged, I mean, you know, I was probably
willingly
like
dragged.
running into these places, you know, because they're spectacular. You know, you're not meant to touch anything. And I still remember it. I would sort of do this and literally wait for someone to kind of physically sort of drag me away. And there's actually some specific object. In book 1, Cillian Jardine finds his ancestor Cadmus's journals, and the way they're described, you know, those are actual books from an actual National Trust house.
How did you come up with the magic?
Well, what I always wanted to do with the magic in the books, because in a way, a large part of the conceit of the world, and one of the big motivations of one of my favourite kind of primary characters, who's Cillian Jardine, who is very magically powerful. We both love Cillian, right? One of sort of Cillian's big motivations is that in this world, people with magic have almost forgotten the magicness of it. They have wealth, they have power, whatever they want they can get through means that don't require magic. It's not that magic has disappeared, it's just sort of neglected. It's just one more tool that the elite has. I wanted to write books that, in addition to being about the abuse of power, I also love books that help you escape somewhere else, and that's where the magic comes in. Like they always tell you, if you're a fantasy writer, they always tell you, you know, your magic has to have rules. But I also sometimes feel that when there are lots of rules, you lose, again, kind of like the sort of the sheer magicness, and I wanted my characters to be surprising themselves. So in book 2, Tarnished City, several of the characters, you know, one of them is a sort of very pragmatic politician, one of them is a sort of somewhat oblivious playboy, and, you know, neither of them has really sort of ever used their magic for much at all.
Now that book 2 is out, can you give us anything? You sort of touched a little bit, but do you have anything else to say? What's in store for the 3rd book?
What's in store for the 3rd book?
Yeah,
well,
who dies, etc.
Yes, not going to tell you that. Although quite a lot of people do die. I met the lovely and incredibly talented Robin Hobb, and she was talking about the responsibility of authors to their characters. And she was saying, you know, you should never just kill a character off for shock value. That's something I've tried really hard to do, you know, sort of through the book. People who've read book 2 know there's a couple of like deaths in that may be a bit unexpected. But I think but I think those characters, they would make those choices that would lead to that outcome. I've applied the same thing in book 3. So yes, other than obviously quite a lot of corpses by the end of book 3, we do see a Britain that is very transformed. It's not resolved in quite the way that you might think. The magic becomes an equal player with the politics in book 3, and that was kind of where I always wanted the series to go. And in terms of pushing my personal buttons, that's what I like best. Book 3 is my favourite. I like book 2. Book 2 is quite nasty and quite fiendish.
It's a bit twisted, isn't it?
It's a bit twisted. But book 2 is kind of where I let my dark side out.
So those are all the questions that I have for Vic today. So I hope you enjoyed this book break and learnt some interesting things about the series and how it will break you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you to Vic for talking to me today, and we'll see you next time. Bye!